invite a couple experts to be with us, but we do appreciate your engagement. So thank you for joining us on Facebook Live. Our topic today is going to deal with the 2020 census as one of the most important activities that are taking place this year. And we're in the midst of it. It's still taking place, but deadlines are approaching. So it's important that people understand our community responsibility and how well we're doing and what else we can do in regards to the 2020 census. I'm very pleased to have really two people who are very knowledgeable on the subject with me today. Beth Lynk, who is the director of the Census Count campaign of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and Gloria Aparicio Blackwell, who is the director of the Office of Community Engagement at the University of Maryland. Welcome. It's good to have both of you here. But I'm going to start off with, why do we do the census? Because it's interesting. I did a little bit of research on this, and the census was originally done under the monarch system so that the crown could get its fair share of revenues, making sure that every person is counted for the purposes of bringing in revenue for the royalty. It's a little bit different, and there was a reason why the architects of our Constitution put the census in our Constitution itself. So the census numbers are used today, as we all know, in regards to allocation of federal resources and political representation. But how important is it for us to do a census every 10 years and to get it right? So let me start, if I might, with Beth Lynk, and then we'll go directly to Gloria Aparicio Blackwell.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, Senator, thank you so much for having me. Really delighted to be here and talk about the importance of the census. As you mentioned, the census is critically important. It is about money, power, respect. The census data and the 2020 census will distribute $1.5 trillion in federal funding nationally every single year, and that's for things like education, infrastructure, healthcare. But notably right now, the resources that we as communities need to rebuild from this public health crisis that we're in, healthcare resources, resources for schools, resources for connectivity and internet broadband, those resources will be distributed based off of census data. So it's really critical that everyone participates, but also it's the basis for how many seats in Congress every state receives in the country, the basis for the distribution of political power. And as a civil rights advocate and working within our coalition, census data is critically important to how we enforce civil rights protections in law. We use that data and where people are, who is living where, and the demographics of our communities to defend and ensure that civil rights protections, voting rights protections, housing protections are upheld across the country. So participating is really important, but ultimately it's about ensuring that the portrait of America is accurate, is full, and represents, as you said, it's in the Constitution that every single person counts, and that every person is included in this head count, the largest peacetime effort that our country does in our count of every person in the United States.
Add to that?
As we try to count our people, and today has been very difficult with the pandemic, Senator. This has been have impacted that effort in an unprecedented way, because now our immigrant community, hard to count communities across the state and across the nation, is going to be undercounted again. In 2010, for the state of Maryland, we missed the opportunity of $1 billion. And I tell my friends, particularly my friends for my community, for the Hispanic community, no pesos. These are dollars that are coming back to our community. And it has been compromised with this issue about the citizenship question before, then now changing the timing in terms of October 31st now to September 30th, and also telling the immigrant community, the undocumented community, not to be counted. That has created more fear and more, the decision to make and complete the census has been completely undermined. So I think today we need to change that we need to change the message. We need to educate our population. And we have been doing a lot of, I'm going to tell you something, Senator, the faith-based community, all the nonprofit organizations, they require an award after all this because they have moved everything to make sure that their communities get their support and complete the census. Right now, in food distributions that we have across any community, they are trying to collect information to call them back and help them to fill the census. So I think it's critical today. It's critical that we all talk about it, that we call a call to action to make sure that everyone gets counted. Tenemos que ser contados.
And the Constitution makes it clear we count the whole number of persons. Every person who's physically present gets counted. So it's not your immigration status, it's not your marital status, it's not your age. Every person gets counted. And we go about it in a way that we mail out forms to every household in the country and ask them to complete the census information. Let's talk a little bit about how successful we are in counting every person. How do we go about doing it? We use the U.S. mail. I know before COVID-19, we used to have a lot of enumerators that are out there knocking on doors trying to get people to fill out their forms. We do a lot of advertising to get people to fill out forms. You mentioned, Gloria, the work of the faith-based communities and the advocacy groups in order to try to encourage people to complete their census information. But let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of how this gets done. And for those who have not completed their forms, do they still have time?
Yes. Yes. People still absolutely have time to fill out the census, but time is getting short. You mentioned kind of how is this going? Is it hard? There's 3 ways that people can respond, and folks can do it right now as you're joining us on this Facebook Live. You can go online to 2020census.gov. You can respond by phone. You can respond by returning that paper questionnaire that you received by mail. And that's the easiest way to respond. It takes less than 10 minutes, and we invite folks to take that opportunity to respond to the census. That being said, the reality is, and I will say the Leadership Conference and the Census Counts campaign, which I run, is really focused on reaching out to the communities that have been historically missed in past censuses. We do that with national organizations that represent communities like communities of color, young children, the tribal communities and American Indians that have been historically missed decade after decade in the census. We do that with our state partners in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, and partnering with cities and other key stakeholders. Now, we know that communities are missed year after year, and that is because an important part of the census is that at the end, the Census Bureau goes door to door and counts folks who did not yet respond on their own. But we also know there's a lot of fear in a normal census, and I'm sure Gloria has kind of mentioned already, and I know Gloria will add to the fact that this census has been historically challenging, and there have been concerted attacks to sow fear and confusion among specific communities and depress participation. And so we're seeing low response rates as a result of that. In addition, we saw a global health pandemic on top. And we know that with the advent of the online option to respond to the census, some folks may not have internet connectivity or comfort with that option. So it is very important that the Census Bureau has an opportunity and has the time to go door to door to reach out to the households that may not yet have had an opportunity to respond. And we know more and more that the communities that need that outreach and need that opportunity to respond are the communities that have been historically missed. Response rates nationally are lower in communities of color. The Black community, predominantly Black communities nationwide, are about 10 points behind the national average in terms of self-response. Latinx community is about 7 points behind in terms of self-response nationally. And we're seeing in American Indian communities that the response rates are half. And so it's very critical that the Census Bureau has the time to participate, or to invite people to participate via those door-to-door interviews if that's what folks prefer. But what we're asking folks right now is that you can respond now, and folks should if you can.
So I want to get to Gloria. Respond. But let me just underscore the point that Beth made. Gray Maxwell and my staff sent me a spreadsheet that shows me where the responses have been. Nationwide, our response rate to date is 64.6%. That's unbelievably low. 64%. In other words, to say that 36% of the people in this country have not responded to the census. In Maryland, we're a little bit better than the national average. We're at 69%. But still, over 30% of the people in our state have not responded to the 2020 census. And to underscore Beth's point about the disparities that it brings, the range is from Carroll County, which has the highest return rate at over 80%, to Worcester County, which is one of our rural counties, which has a response rate just over 32%. So there's a disparity here. When we look at Baltimore County, their rate is 70.8, but Baltimore City is 54%. If those numbers hold, the resources that are supposed to come into Baltimore City are going to be a lot less than its true share of the population of our country. And that number, that aid, will not just be for next year, it will be for the next 10 years, will be based upon the census that are being taken right now. So it really is critically important that we return the census, not just so we can get a fair count for our nation, so we have that information, so that the community in which we live in has the resources to keep us safe, to provide for our health care, to provide for our public safety, to provide for our needs, but also that we have fair political representation. It's not just at the federal level, because the census numbers are also used for the state legislative reapportionment numbers and our local councils. So it does deal with political representation as well as funds. So Gloria, my question to you is this. Let's say that, yes, you did send me a questionnaire. I didn't fill it out. I don't know where it is now. If I had that questionnaire, as Beth pointed out, it's pretty simple. I can return that document, answer the questions, and return it by U.S. mail. Or I can go online and complete it with the identification number that's on there. Or I can pick up the phone and make a phone call, and someone will help me complete my census. So it's kind of easy. You pick the way you want to do it, by phone, by mail, or by internet. But let's say I don't have that form any longer, and I haven't been counted. What do I do? Beth, Gloria, you're on mute. Okay.
Yes. Now, so great question. So I tell people, yes, you were assigned a number. Your house was assigned with a code. Well, that code can go out of the window. You just go, even call. The beauty this time, this is the first time that they have done this online. This is the first time that the U.S. Census Bureau decided to do this process online. So therefore, for individuals that do not want to have an enumerator, a U.S. representative, because people are afraid from the government, this is the way to avoid that too. You just go into go to online to 2020census.gov, and you just pull up the document, and you're just gonna put your address, and then you get the survey immediately. 10 easy questions. Now, I don't have connectivity. I do not understand English. Well, if you have connectivity, but you wanted to do it in your own language, it has been translated in many languages. And also, if you want to call on the phone, you have a census representative that speak 13 languages that you can have that access and help to complete the form. So I tell the families, please, the only thing that you can do is just pick up the phone. You have a cell phone, you have a smartphone. Use that tool to help us to get you counted. Hay que hazte contar fácilmente. En español, 844-468-2020 es el número para completes el formulario. For the individuals speak English, is 844-330-2020. That is easy. So it's all over the place. So I tell people, you don't have an excuse to not to. I know that you're going through a lot today. I know that you have insecurity. I know you're losing your job. I know you are sick. But this moment, this is the money. And one thing that I tell people to complete, to convince, to make the case, when we complete that form, either is for our newborn or 5 years of age or 100 years old, that form, that individual brings to the community $1,800 per person per year for 10 years. That is a lot that we're bringing to bring to the community and provide the funds needed, even to fix the potholes that hurt everyone if we don't have the money to fix the roads and the transportation. So I think it's a lot at stake right now. And I think for hospitals, for your schools, for the connectivity, we need funds. And that's the only way that we can do it. So it is easy. Those 3 ways: by mail, by online, and by phone. You have it right there.
I'm glad you mentioned the $1,800 per year per person. That's a large sum of money. And we all talk about the facts that we like to see our taxes as low as possible. Completing the census helps us to get our fair share of revenues and allows us to have less pressure on raising our local taxes in order to pay for essential services. So there's a lot of reasons to complete the census form. But let me tell you a common question that's asked. And Beth, let me get your answer to this. And that is, I'm concerned that I fill out the census information and list everyone that's in the household, that my landlord might get upset with the number that I have listed here, or that I am concerned that that information will be made available to my employer, and I don't want my employer to know that information about who I'm living with. Or I'm concerned that they'll use this information in order to collect taxes from me or to do something that I don't want them to do. What's your answer to that, Beth?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of very justified fear and concern about sharing information with the government in this moment. Folks are concerned, as you noted, is my information going to be shared with a housing authority or with the police or with ICE? And the answer is no. The answer is that census data is some of the most protected data in federal law. Title 13, which is the federal code which protects census data, indicates that there is incredibly severe penalties for census enumerators or staff for leaking people's personally identifiable information, which includes up to 5 years of jail time and a very hefty multi-$100,000 fine. And so there are folks should know and be confident that there are very strong confidentiality protections in place that protect your information for up to 72 years. So that 72-year mark is important because some folks may say, well, you know, I did an ancestry report of my family and I looked at census data, but that was because it had exceeded that 72-year marker. But no, your data is protected for 72 years. Also note that members of the leadership conference and our coalition partners, including MALDEF and AJC, have stepped up and are watchdogs and have a coalition of over 300 civil servants, civil rights leaders, and advocates that are stepping up to monitor for any breach of confidentiality and to ensure that that very strong legal protection is upheld. There's never been a breach of census confidentiality in the past, and we're here really to say we've got your back. And we're monitoring for any of that in the future. So folks should feel confident that data will not be shared and is protected. So it is, it won't be shared with a landlord, it won't be shared with housing authority as well. I think one point, particularly about that housing piece, that example, that's important to note is we do know one community that has been missed at increasing rates in the past couple of censuses is young children. And often folks may forget to include young children or be concerned about occupancy issues or other things. And so folks should know, if you have filled out your census and you're thinking, oh, I forgot to add my young child, you can still to add them, and you actually can just go online or call the phone number and resubmit your form for the household, including all folks in your household. And the Census Bureau has processes to fix that on the back end. If you've also forgotten your unique ID that was sent to your household, you can respond without that as well. So know that the data is protected. And if now you're thinking, oh, I forgot to add someone, you can go back and do that.
So, Beth, it's very clear what you said is absolutely correct. It's in the statute. It's a criminal offense to release any of the personal identifier information. Confidentiality is guaranteed. We've had a long history of protecting the confidentiality of census information. We're proud in Maryland that the Census Bureau's national office is located in Suitland, Maryland. We know the people that are doing the work, and they treat this information with the confidentiality that is required under law. So you're protected. But Gloria, I want to ask you a question that's frequently asked. Okay, we'll accept the fact that the information we put on our forms are kept confidential, but I'm concerned with President Trump said that we have to be citizens, or he wanted to ask this citizenship question. And so can you really tell me that my immigration status is not going to be affected by filling out the census information? What's your answer to that?
Well, if we follow what the Constitution and what we have in place to protect the data, it shouldn't matter. It's not going to be a problem. Your immigration status is not being asked. It's just about your name and the information that we're asking you to complete in that census. So we're telling the community that it's not going to be shared with immigration, with any federal agencies, even with the White House. What the president will get is an aggregate number. It doesn't say that identify Gloria Aparicio Blackwell, she's from Venezuela, she must be an undocumented individual. It doesn't say that. What it says, I live in Montgomery County in this case, in Gatesburg, and that's it. And 4 people live in the house, and that's it. So that is the information that will be sent aggregate, not just an individual. So we're telling our community to please trust the system. And we're also, and the U.S. Census Bureau, I'm going to tell you something. They have been working every single day with communities. I have never seen so much response. I don't know, in 2010, I have been talking so much about census or having a mobilization like it's happening today. I don't know, Beth, if you agree with that, but it has been a pleasant work with that organization and with the U.S. Census representative. But we have to convince our community that it's going to be safe. I know sometimes you wonder because you never know what could happen, but we are trying to do the best possible that submit that information. We all are applying for driver's license, for many other angles that if they really want to get you, I don't see that the census could be one of those that will come directly to ICE immigration to come to you. So it's to trust the system, and we need you. We need that $1,800 per person per year.
And I just really want to underscore that point. I don't know of any responsible leader that wants anything other than census information being done fairly and confidentiality maintained. There's a long history of census information. So it's clear, and by the way, the president's desire to put a spotlight on citizenship in order to discourage some individuals from coming forward to fill out their census information, probably because of political representation, was denied by the courts. So it's the courts are on our side on this issue. It's a clear case. You will be protected. But I just want to underscore the last point that Gloria said. These numbers are going to affect the community that you live in for the next 10 years. And we appreciate everyone's civic-minded responsibilities. But we really do all have a responsibility to be counted so that our community can take care of the people in our community. So this is something that is important for you, but it's also important for your community. And we just urge everyone to please complete this information. We only get once every 10 years to get this right. And I can tell you these resources are so desperately needed. I see the impact when we don't have enough funds to take care of public health issues or take care of education issues or take care of so many important community responsibilities and issues. And by the way, it's usually the underrepresented communities that have the greatest challenges. So they're the ones who are going to be even more at risk by not having everyone counted during the census time itself. So we just urge everybody to please take advantage of what this means to our community and complete your census information. So I want to get on to the issue of certain opportunities that still are available. The Census Bureau is still hiring enumerators. So just telling people, and the point was raised that we have now a little over a month in order to get the information to the Census Bureau to be counted. We hope that date will be extended. There's been an effort to extend that date, and we're going to fight for it. And Congress will be meeting in September, and we hope we'll get that date extended. You can't wait to say, we'll see what Congress is going to do. We need you to complete your information now and get it in ASAP. But we also need people who are able to go into our community to try to help find and help the people who have not been counted. We know where the concentrations are, and it's always helpful. We have people from the community that are willing to help us with their neighbors to get them recorded. There's a special effort being made where we have hard to count communities on which we are able to get special help, 1,500 around the nation, 10 in Baltimore City, that are going into the homeless population, going into the immigrant community, going into the areas where we know you don't have people in conventional housing, you have people who've been in transient housing, all those areas that are even more difficult. But Beth, can you just tell us what is the Leadership Council Conference doing in order to try to get the traditionally undercounted communities the type of help they need so that we can get a better count?
Absolutely. And I think just kind of a part of this, as has been said, I mean, it's in the Constitution, every person counts. We have been seeing again and again attempts to sow chaos and confusion about who counts, about how to participate in the census, and notably recently, due to political pressure, the Census Bureau has been forced to shorten the timeline, and so the census now ends on September 30th. And that threatens the ability of everyone to participate. I want to note, you know, that the Constitution originally, with the first census, noted that Black Americans were counted as 3/5 of a person. That has been changed. We are 5/5, and any effort to sell any community in this country that you don't count, you are not a person, is something we are fighting, and we fight tooth and nail. And so one thing that everyone can do as to show up, to show your power, to raise your voice, and to represent yourself in your community, is to be counted and say, yes, I am 5/5, I count. So we thank folks for doing that. I think at the Leadership Conference and the Census Counts campaign, as I mentioned, our national partners, our state partners, and local partners have been for months and over 2 years planning for and getting out the count to educate communities, train partners, and ultimately get out the count, whether it's via Facebook Lives like this, or engaging and providing resources to local church leaders. We actually got in El Paso delivery drivers that have census stickers on the side of their trucks as they're delivering food that say, if you want to prevent an enumerator from coming to your door or stop the knock, participate on your own. That's the best way to decrease the likelihood of an enumerator showing up at your door. So we're trying to be very creative and encourage participation. There's a lot of really exciting outreach and activities that are happening across the board. I know that in Maryland, members of the state legislature have been lifting up, have really been census champions and lifting up the great work and how important it is to participate in the census. And so we know that in many cases, the messenger is more important than the message. And so everyone here, if you've already participated in the census, you are a critical messenger in your own community. So if you can share how important it is that everyone participates as soon as possible, knowing that their efforts to try and suppress census participation, it's more important now than ever that we all participate.
So, Gloria, tell us what the Office of Community Engagement at the University of Maryland is doing in order to try to get particularly those communities that are traditionally undercounted, getting their information back to the Census Bureau.
Sure, and as you know, the other hard to count population are college students. Big situation here, because many of the parents will say, I would like to count them in New Jersey, nothing against New Jersey, but they are in Maryland. So we are telling the students that this is critical. They also matter, in particular if they are here in the state of Maryland, particularly for the Pell Grants. That money is, the funding that are coming from the Pell Grant are coming from that data number. So we asked them to do. So the Office of Community Engagement started all this work, making sure that the students under the civic engagement component, census is important. And it's not just to learn about it, but also to exercise and be having the opportunity to complete the census. For those who live in our university, we go with the group quarters. Those are the individuals that we send the data directly to the Census Bureau. And then the students that live off campus, we have energized them with creating videos, creating Instagram Live, no Facebook, but apparently that's for all of us. The Instagram is for the college students, apparently, so and TikTok. But we have done more into the area of Instagram Live. But for the undercounted community, particular surrounding the university, what we have done a lot is in the food distribution, going out and providing information and collecting information from the individuals to let them know to help them to complete the census. Council member Dennis Tavera, she have done an incredible job in getting the community being counted, in telling them we wanted to do more of this in the future. We need your help. And they have been very successful in increasing and moving that needle. As a matter of fact, September 7th, which is going to be a Labor Day weekend or Labor Day, that day they're going to do a caravan. You know, we do those caravan now for celebrating. Well, we're going to do it for the census. And they're going to be going to particular areas where they see that the numbers are not coming as they should be. So, and they're going to have census enumerators around asking them, hablándoles en español, el 7 de septiembre, cuéntate, and telling them the importance and having them to complete it right down there and telling them, trust the system, please. This is important. So I think there is a matter of education. And I'm going to step back. We took a lot of time going into the schools, teaching the kids what census is all about. And that will matriculate in the sense that then they will go back to their homes and asking their parents, we need to do this. And so the Prince George's school system decided to make a challenge, a video challenge, and they have the cutest videos that came from them. And we're using this to promulgate those into the social media. And I think that's the way that we need to be bringing back those kind of knowledge that have been lost. We are not talking so much of a civic responsibility, our civic duties. So I think the social aspect of in the classroom needs to come back to talk about those important areas and letting parents know that they need that kind of support and to act, basically.
Our topic on Facebook Live today is the 2020 census, how we're doing on it, the importance of it, and what you can do to make sure that you're recorded in the 2020 census. My guests today are Beth Lynk, who is the director of Census Count Campaign of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and Gloria Aparicio Blackwell, who is the director of the Office of Community Engagement at the University of Maryland. We have several questions from the chat box, and let me just give one. I think it's a good follow-up to yours, Gloria. You mentioned that students are challenging at times to get counted because they don't know whether they're supposed to count at their home or whether they're on campus, et cetera. And you're out there explaining you got to get counted, and there's an answer to that question, and you're giving them that answer. But we have Jose Cortez who asks, will the census count impact funding for public colleges?
Oh, well, Jose, thank you. Thank you for that question, Jose Cariza. One of the things that I'm going to tell you, of course it is, that is money, what I mentioned before, the issue of the Pell Grant. So that money also drive that money for the Pell Grant. And if we don't have that kind of support, then the college is gonna be impacted. And at the same time, we are in the city that we are part of needs those funding. So if we have the students completing, what a tremendous legacy that student is going to leave when they leave campus, because they are bringing that 1,800 that I'm mentioning. I'm going to be mentioning throughout the whole presentation the importance of the $1,900 that you are contributing to the university, to the community that you are coming in. So it's important. It's more about for the Pell Grant. It's more about for the public service that you receive while you are on campus.
And I think everyone should understand that the census numbers are used to distribute funds involving 55 separate federal programs. The last year that we have the data is the fiscal year 2016. And for the state of Maryland, those funds totaled over $16 billion. So if we undercount by, let's say, just 10%, we could lose billions of dollars that would otherwise be coming to the people of the state of Maryland. So it really is a major tool to help us deal with community issues. So Beth, I have a question here from Catherine, who asks, can Congress pass legislation to keep the administration from stopping the count early?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Senator? Oh, sorry about that. Thank you, Catherine, for your question. For folks who may just be joining us, we talked about, how important the census is and the fact that we're going into a really critical part of the census where the Census Bureau goes door to door to count the folks who may not have responded on their own. And we're coming in with historically low response rates nationwide, but also particularly in the communities that have been missed decade after decade. And what we're seeing is on top of all of that, at the request what we saw is an about face from the administration, originally in light of the severe operational challenges that the Census Bureau has had to face in the midst of this global health crisis, this pandemic. The Census Bureau and the administration called for an extension of the 2 statutory deadlines when the Census Bureau sends the completed data to the White House and to Congress and fills their constitutional mandate to provide data for the purposes of apportionment. The request was for that to be extended in light of this unprecedented situation we're living in, to be extended to April for the data for apportionment. The administration turned around and rescinded that request following a memorandum that they introduced, which also directs the Census Bureau to create data, a separate data file that excludes people who are undocumented from the data set. Doesn't change how people are counted, doesn't change the fact that everyone counts, and that memorandum was litigated immediately by a number of lawsuits immediately after it was introduced. but that in an effort to move forward with that effort to really damage and politicize the count, the administration withdrew their request to extend those statutory deadlines for the purposes of when the Census Bureau has to submit that data to Congress and to the White House. So what we're asking is that those deadlines are extended in light of the pandemic. What that means now for folks, the Census Bureau now only has until September 30th to complete the data collection. So you only have until September 30th to respond online by phone or by returning that paper questionnaire by mail. And then the Census Bureau has only 2 months to compile the data, to sort through data processing issues under normal circumstances. In a normal year, they would have 5 months to do that. Now they would only have 2. And so really important that we see some action on that. So I think the House has passed the effort to extend the statutory deadlines in HEROES Act. And now I think it's up to the Senate to extend those statutory deadlines to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to be counted, and that the Census Bureau has the ability to change that deadline back, that we all have to respond and to exercise our right to participate in the census back to October 30th or October 31st. So we're asking everyone to certainly support that effort. It's going to be important so that we all have everyone has the opportunity to participate in the census, because otherwise we'll see very severe undercounts.
The Constitution is very clear about the requirements for a census every 10 years to count every whole person. It's very clear about that. The method that we do the census is left to Congress, and specifically Congress has the authority to set the ground rules for how that census takes place. The appropriation process on a bipartisan basis provided $7.6 billion to the Census Bureau to carry this out. That was Congress's responsibility to make sure that the constitutional provisions are carried out appropriately for the census count. The deadlines can also be adjusted by Congress. So the power is within the Congress. And as Beth has pointed out, the House of Representatives has already taken action consistent with what we thought was going to be the original position of the administration in light of COVID-19. COVID-19's had a dramatic impact on so many parts of our life. One is the ability to get the information out for responding to the 2020 census. Gloria mentioned all these wonderful tools that we had in our schools. Well, our schools are not quite as efficient as we thought they would be as a result of COVID-19. And people have been very distracted because of COVID-19. And you're not answering your doors like you used to before COVID-19. So for all those reasons, we need additional time. And once the administration changed course, a senator whose name has been heard by people around the world very frequently in recent days, Senator Harris, introduced legislation that I have co-sponsored that would extend the dates similar to what the House has done, to give us more time to complete the census and give additional tools to the Census Bureau in order to get a full counting. We need to do that. So where are we on that? The House passed the HEROES Act in mid-May. The Senate has not brought up the COVID-related legislation. And yes, there are so many central aspects to the next round of COVID relief, including what do we do with unemployment insurance, and what do we do with state and local government and helping state and local government? What do we do with people with their rents and their landlord and evictions and foreclosures? What do we do about protecting the integrity of our election system? That's the COVID-19 and international interference. What do we do with the U.S. Postal Service? What do we do with our schools? All that's related in the COVID-19 related legislation that Congress will be considering come immediately after Labor Day. We expect the Senate to be able to take up legislation. But a key part of that legislation should be the census provisions. We need to make sure that they're included, which brings me back to Gloria about civic engagement. How do we get that message across to the members of Congress, members of the Senate, I should say? You got my attention, but how are we going to get senators to understand how important it is to act on this legislation?
You know, that's what advocacy comes to be, the center, the process that we had to take in place by working with the elected officials, the local elected officials, the advocacy groups, the college students. I'm going to tell you something. College students now, they are deeply involved in this process. I have been so impressed about their commitment to make changes, to take the kind of the say we need to change this course that we are right now. So I feel that that's one of the ways that we need to showcase to the individuals. You need to support the extensions of completing the census, protecting the rights to vote and the mediums to get the votes out. And I feel that communities today are working together. I'm impressed with. I created this along with another group. We created this group of individuals, the Maryland Latino Coalition, and that's bringing all Latino leaders, and we're all working together, finding out how to help each other. And I feel that those coalitions happens across the communities and counties and state. The chances to change the course of what we're going right now, it will be different. But I believe that in terms of the civic engagement, it's education. How are we educating our students from K through 12, from college? And all of that is very critical and important. And telling families, why do we need to do all of this now and moving forward? 10 years later, we're going to have these discussions again. So I think that we all vote. Hopefully, that's the case. If that is the case, that's one of the things that we need to be measuring our elected officials.
Well, Beth, did you want to add to that?
I would, and I just want to echo, just how important this is. I also just want to note that, we are not alone. I mean, everyone here listening, all of your constituents, Senator, know they have a census champion in you. We're also trying to raise the alarm about what's happening and the fact that we need to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to exercise their right to participate in the census. So we're tweeting online using hashtag Save the Census, and there's opportunities, petitions, ways to engage, but also note that this isn't a partisan issue. The 4 former Census Bureau directors from both Republican and Democratic past administrations have lifted up the importance of ensuring the Census Bureau has the time it needs to complete the count fully. Over 900 organizations from across the country have called on Congress to take action to extend the census timeline. Over 500 leaders from foundation CEOs and leaders in philanthropy have stepped up, and over 80 businesses are lifting their voices. So it's important to note that an inaccurate census will hurt everyone. An inaccurate census will fail the whole country. And an inaccurate census will really deprive communities of your resources that you deserve, as it was mentioned at the top of the call. And so we really are all having a vested interest in raising our voices and talking about the importance of ensuring that everyone has an opportunity to participate in the census, because as we prepare to recover and as we're folks like you, Senator Cardin, are supporting and pushing for really comprehensive COVID-19 relief, one of the key components of key relief is going to make sure that the resources for housing, education, healthcare, unemployment insurance are certainly going to the communities that need them right now, but also are distributed equitably for the next 10 years, because this is going to be a multi-year recovery. We're going to need those resources in the long term. And if we have an inaccurate census, if we don't all participate, but also if everyone doesn't have an opportunity to participate, it's going to have a decade and possibly longer impact on our communities and on the communities that really need the support right now, particularly.
So our bottom line message is we really need you to complete your census information and to make sure everyone in your community and help us get everyone to get a full count for our community. There is no risk factors. There's confidentiality. It's only used for the purposes of a distribution of funds and information about our community in a broad sense, not on an individual sense, and for political representation. But we find, as it is with all the things that we do, there are some bad people out there. We see this with identity theft. We see this with cyber crimes. We see this in so many different areas where we have programs at the federal government, and then we find bad actors who try to indicate they're from the federal government or they're from the government, and they need certain information. They need your social security number. They need your credit card information. They need information so that they can basically fraudulently get resources from you. So I want to make sure we have that warning out there. Is there any reason why a person working on behalf of the Census Bureau or in completing your census information, you should ever have to give your credit card information or social security information or things like that? Is there any reason why that would be required by anyone working on behalf of the census?
No.
No,
there's not. Oh.
Either one.
No, that question is not going to be asked. It's only about your name, your address, how many people. Now, let me talk a little bit about the race question, particularly for many the Latino community. I think the race is just in this country that nomenclature was created here. So for individuals that are coming from South America, it's going to be a little bit challenging because that's not the way that is how it can be defined. So I tell them, whatever you feel that you wanted to represent yourself, you have an area where you can say other, and then you write in that other, what do you think yourself is? But that is the only questions that you're going to be asking about your gender, about your address. Nothing to do with a bank account, nothing to do with the Social Security. If that questions are being asked, close the door and call the police. But the census takers, they're coming with a badge. You're going to see them with a bag that will say census. They're going to keep a distance because they don't want to get you in a situation that compromise. So the physical distancing will be there. It's just a matter of providing that information. They are doing their job. They wanted to make sure that they can count you. Please answer that door and provide the information. If they start asking those questions, that's a signal that you just need to stop and close the door and call the police.
Beth?
That's absolutely right. And I think that the note about how to identify census enumerators is really important. If you get that knock on your door, ask for the badge. They'll have a badge with a Commerce Department watermark. They'll have that bag, as Gloria mentioned, that says Census Bureau on it. They'll have an iPhone 8 that has a Census Bureau sticker on the back. And will be able to identify themselves as a census employee. And if you have any questions, call the Census Bureau, verify their identity before providing any information. We are also monitoring for any instances of a fraud or any issues. If you have concerns about that, you can certainly report it to us, and we'll look into it. It's censuscounts.org/report. We're also working, there's a number of hotlines that have been set up by partners that are providing resources in different languages, so in 10 different languages. So if you have questions or concerns and don't feel comfortable going to the Census Bureau, we'd be happy to support you there.
I think that's an important point. If someone is doing something that's wrong, asking you information about Social Security numbers or credit card numbers, There is a Social Security hotline for fraud and identity theft. Unfortunately, there are a lot of actors beyond the Census Bureau background that are trying to get identity theft through the Social Security numbers. And if you can also call the Maryland Attorney General's office, who has a hotline also. And as Beth pointed out, the Human Rights, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights also have hotlines. So all of our groups have that. Please let us know. You contact our office and we'll put you in touch with the appropriate authorities. But the census enumerators all identify themselves. And as Gloria pointed out, they're going to be very mindful of social distancing. We got to recognize that COVID-19 has had just a horrific effect on our community. And the best thing we can do to get help in our community, whether it's in education, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in economic recovery, we're going to have special programs to deal with it. We need a good count, a complete count on the 2020 census to get the resources that we need. But we also need to deal with the pandemic itself. Probably the most important thing. Social distancing, wearing our masks, washing our hands frequently, doing what's necessary, and let us make sure that we have testing available, readily available for all in our community. These are steps that we're taking and we're going to insist upon as we get into the next round of COVID-19 relief. But quite frankly, getting this virus under control has so many impacts on so many things that we're talking about. It's clear to me that we were on track to get a much stronger response on 2020 before COVID-19 hit. And COVID-19 has now made that much more challenging for all of us. That means we all have to work a little bit harder. And we have to make sure we get as many people who are not counted today counted. So let's all chip in and work together. My guest today, Gloria Aparicio Blackwell, who is official title Director of Office of Community Engagement at the University of Maryland. Since I'm an alum of the University of Maryland Law School, I'll give that a plug.
Good.
And Beth Lynk, who is the Director of Census Count Campaign of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. I've worked with both of these groups over the years, and they're both tremendous organizations. I'm going to give my guests an opportunity to make some final comments. We'll start first with Gloria.
Yes, 3 ways to complete the census. Online, 2020census.gov, by phone, and by mail. Do it. It's important, muy importante para nuestras comunidades. Hazte contar. Es fácil, es seguro y sí se puede. Gracias.
Beth Lynk.
Well, thank you so much. First and foremost, one, make sure you've taken your census, and you can take it online by phone or by returning that paper questionnaire. 2, tell everyone you know to participate in the census. If you know someone who had a baby before April 1 of 2020, check in, make sure that baby was counted, talk to your friends, talk to your family. Everyone probably knows one person who may not have gotten around to that census form yet, so please ask them. And then number 3, let's all lift up and make sure everyone has an opportunity to participate in the census, and let's save the census and encourage the timeline for the census to be extended. You can join us in the conversation online at #SaveTheCensus. But thank you so much, Senator.
And let me again thank my 2 guests, but just repeat that, please make sure that the census is returned by September 30. We hope to extend that date, but let's make sure that we get the census information in by September 30th. And just one more reminder, please make sure that if you're not registered to vote, to register to vote. November 30th is our election. We're asking people to do it safely. And if you want to do it by mail, that's the safest way to do it. Applications need to be made with the state election board and must be made as soon as possible. There's a deadline in October, but again, don't wait till that deadline. Request your absentee ballot today so that you can vote by mail. Thank you all for joining us today as we talked about Census 2020. Again, thanks to my guests, Gloria Aparicio Blackwell and Beth Lynk, and thank you all for joining us on Facebook Live. Thanks.